This is Elliott Serrano and Jose Melendez coming to you from Dreamland Comics in Schaumburg, Illinois. Thank you for joining us here yet again on the Comic Culture Warrior YouTube channel. Oh, we're still alive. The guy in the parking lot didn't kill us like we were afraid would occur.
I forgot about that.
I actually looked into the back of my car to make sure somebody wasn't hiding in there when we were leaving. If you're just tuning in, we have already talked about Scott Pilgrim and Chew by John Layman and Rob Guillory. We're going to let's get into a DC book here. It's actually a DC book that some of you guys have talked about on the boards and you've been looking at. Secret Six by Gail Simone and Nicola Scott with partial inking by Doug Hazelwood. What makes this book unique to me outside of it being another book featuring villains? I mean, this is like almost like the Thunderbolts. Well, see, Thunderbolts are the Suicide Squad of the Marvel Universe. So this would be the Thunderbolts, which were the Suicide Squad of the DC Universe. And Gail Simone, we already know, one of the few noted name female creators in mainstream books. Nicola Scott, also doing art duties, a female creator. I was, I'll be honest, this was one of the first times I picked up this book, and I read the first couple pages, and I was like, it looks very much like, her pencils look a lot like Jerry Ordway's stuff, but as it goes on, you start seeing more of her own style as it goes. It's very well-rendered stuff. I gotta say, I'm really impressed. She has a bit of a feel of Jan Duursema from Dark Horse. She does the Star Wars Legacy books. I'm surprised that a lot of the female artists that I see, a lot of their work, their stuff has a very well-rendered look to it. It feels very real, very solid. Even more so than a lot of the male artists. And you know, a very consistent look all the way through the book. I mean, you go from page 1 to page 22. It doesn't look rushed or anything. Right. So I have to say, kudos to the artist on this, because this is a pretty well rendered book.
Well, they worked before these two on Birds of Prey way back in the day, like 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half. And I really liked their work together on there. They actually did back when it was the Secret. They did a crossover with Secret Six.
Secret Six
in Birds of Prey. And Gail, I've actually been following this book since it was Villains United back when the Infinite Crisis.
That's right.
Because that was an awesome miniseries, and then they followed that up with the Secret Six mini, another 6-issue mini, and then they finally gave it an ongoing.
The book is very smartly written to Gail Simone. You read this, she grounds this story arc here, the beginning of this story, in the real world. You're in South America, dealing with the slave trade, and you're taking comic book villains and you're putting them right in the middle of some real world bad stuff. I mean, real world bad stuff.
Right, and you might want to explain a little bit here, because we have been giving shit for Marvel for doing all villains books, right? Where it's just not fun at all because of villains being villains. The thing with Secret Six, ever since Villains United, is that, they're villains, but they're not... They're pretty much... They're a team that's for hire. Anyone can hire them to do anything. Right. Like a wet works type of thing. Right. And then that's what they'll do. But, see, in here, the people who hire them are actually more villainous than the villains themselves.
Right.
Which is pretty interesting to see, because it does kind of make them anti-heroes, because there are people worse than them. Whereas in, like, the Bullseye Dark Reign miniseries and a couple of, like, the Hood one, they're pretty much the epitome of evil.
Right.
So there's no really topping them.
Right.
In this way, that's why Gail Simone, at the beginning, they do like a little bit of a flashback to introduce people who are going to hire them, and they're pretty fucking evil. They're
pretty bad.
I mean, I don't care. I mean, Deadshot in the Secret Six is probably just the most evil out of all of them, I would say.
But see, even with the thing with Deadshot, I mean, you could say evil, true. He is amoral. He has no morals.
That's better.
Basically, you pay him enough, he'll just do it.
Right.
But the thing too about him, and even more so, there's a bit, and I'll get in. I don't want to get into too much spoiler. If you haven't read this book and you don't want to know what happens, stop now. But there's a scene later on. I'm assuming you're watching because you want to know this, where Deadshot is asked to kill a slave that's trying to escape.
Right.
And he says, "Sure." Bam, and he shoots her. He kills her like that. And Bane makes a comment like, "What, you would kill slaves? What's wrong with you?" And Deadshot says, "Well, I could, if I wanted her to suffer, I could have made her suffer, but that wasn't my job. I killed her, bam, like that." So he's a mercenary. He kills for hire, but he's not a sadist about it.
Right, and he's probably the worst out of the bunch.
And he's the worst out of the bunch, right? Whereas, Bullseye is a sadist about it.
Right.
And Bullseye has really no reason to kill except for the fact that he gets his jollies from it. Mm-hmm. Like, again, in that issue of that Dark Reign Bullseye issue where he killed that news reporter for no reason whatsoever after friggin' saving her life, which I don't get why. So at least this kind of... Am I happy with it? No, but, I mean, it makes sense to me, and yes, you see the shades of black, because there's really no gray here. I mean, these are all bad guys.
Well, if you've been reading this book since Villains United, there is shades of gray.
Okay.
There really is, especially with Catman and
Bane too.
Well, Bane is an interesting character in here because he's weaning himself off of the Venom. The Venom,
right.
Okay? He rips a guy's arm and beats the guy to death with it in here. But at the same time, I mean, the way that he talks to Deadshot about that...
Yeah, how could you have killed a slave? Yeah, right.
Exactly, whereas these are bad guys who were shooting at them, and it was a little bit over the top, just a little bit. But it just shows that he has some kind of morality. There's a certain line that he doesn't cross.
Yeah, although when you say the bad guys that were shooting at them actually were rebels who were trying to liberate the slave camp. So...
That's true, but they didn't know that.
Yeah, that's true. In either case, what impresses me the most about this book is, again, the creative team. It is a very solid book. I don't know if Nicola Scott and Gail Simone, are doing some solid, top-notch work on here. I have one criticism. Didn't have a mature readers on it because you have some pretty graphic violence in here. And, Bane rips off somebody's arm and beats...
But here's the difference. If that was in a Bendis comic, it would have been a splash page.
Yeah, that's
But in
true.
it's one of 7 panels on this.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, see, this is the size of the panel right here.
Yeah,
like I said,
that's
if
true.
it was a Bendis comic, it would have been full splash page.
And I think that also speaks to the sensibilities of the artist, that she said, it's happening, but we don't need to really go a little too overboard with it. And Artemis here.
Yeah, just shows up.
She's like captive of this guy. I'm really intrigued. I mean, again, I'm intrigued to see what happens. I just hope Artemis gets that restraint collar or whatever off of her so she can kick everybody's ass, because that's what I'm looking forward to in the next issue.
I mean, and then you look at this last panel though, when they're all around the dead slave's body, and it's like that they really don't look very happy.
No, they're like, what? So, why are we?
Again, if this was the new Avengers, they'd be like jerking off on it or something like that. Sorry, that's a bit much.
The Dark Avengers.
The Dark Avengers. The Dark Avengers. Big difference.
Yeah. All right. Great book. Pick it up. When we come back, we will talk about... let's make Sar happy. Let's talk a little manga when we come back.
Oh, okay.
We'll see you then.